Good evening from wherever you are joining us. A very warm welcome to all of you joining us for today's How to Child Rights series, peer exchange webinar on environment, including climate action with children through the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child's monitoring and reporting process. Very warm welcome. My name is Retta Gitacho. I work for the African Child Policy Forum. I'm also the external expert for the African Committee of Experts on the Right and Welfare of the Child's working group on children's rights and climate change. But my role today is to moderate this webinar. So before we start, and to ensure everyone can understand what I'm saying, I want to bring your attention to the fact that there is simultaneous interpretation available in 4 languages: English, French, Arabic, and Portuguese. So this is very important for this particular webinar, since we would like to support CESOs across language barriers. And to be able to hear and share experiences, learn from one another. So please check instructions in the chat box right now, and you will see a globe on the screen where you can choose your preferred language. So I'll wait a few seconds to make sure everyone is able to join or to choose your preferred language. So I hope that you'll be able to hear what I'm saying in your preferred language now. In case there is any problem, please let us know in the chat box, please. Please note that the session today is also recorded. And the recording will be saved online on the resource page that we will put in the chat box, and it will be shared with all participants at the end of the webinar, along with, of course, other resources that we'll be sharing today and mentioning today. So now we invite you to type your name and organization and where you come from in the chat box, please. You can also share your reflections and experience during the webinar. If you have any questions, please, we encourage you to use the question and answer toolbox instead of the chat box, but feel free to use the chat box as well to share your experiences. So please note, we will also have the possibility to take questions and to ask you to share your experiences after the presentations too. If you are an adult, please connect your camera when speaking. Otherwise, stay on mute and turn off the camera when you are not speaking, to make sure the sound is clear, the connection is clear for everyone. Thank you. If you are a child, you are free to choose if you want to put your camera on or not. So you can do so as you wish. To make the session more interactive, we'll also be using the Mentimeter platform. We will tell you about it a little bit later. But first things first, before we start, since we want this webinar to be a safe space for everyone, especially the many children that are joining us today, I will invite James from the African Movement for Working Children and Youth to guide us on some of our safeguarding considerations. James is our child safeguarding focal point for this webinar. So James, I hand it over to you. A very warm welcome.
Thank you very much. Just 1 minute for me to get set. Using another audio. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible, and you can start, James.
Yeah. Thank you so much for giving me the privilege. And as Rita have just said, thank you, Rita, for introducing me. It's a privilege for me to be here and also at least talk a little bit about child safeguarding. I know most of us that have been working with child rights organizations, we know already about child safeguarding, just briefly to ensuring that our meeting is safe for children and also for adults. So I just want to share some few things with us that we just need to consider, just like a code of conduct. So this online meeting could be safe for everyone. So as regard the code of conduct, you know already, we will expect everyone here, adults and also children themselves who are also connected to respect this. We expect of you to be respectful. That is to use your words consciously and be respectful when you reply. And in terms of languages, we know the kind of languages to be used. And we ensure that to ensure also the child safeguarding, we want you to follow all the protocols to protect child participation. That is to say, the things that we're going to say that doesn't harm children themselves. We need to maintain the confidentiality of each content, informations that are being shared here. Do not record or share content from the conference without prior consent. That is, you have to ask the organizers before you share anything, either picture, either information from children. So before you use those information, you need to contact the organizers before you do that. And we have to stay focused, that is to engage constructively and stay on topic, discussing what brings us here, not discussing any other thing. And also, we need to report also any misconduct, that is misconduct that you have observed, maybe an adult sending you some messages in the background and privately, and this is not allowed here. So if there is any misconduct, you have to inform the organizers directly, or you can also send me a message. If you have my contact, you can also get in touch with me quickly on that. So we just want you to know that these are some of the quite short precautions that we put in place. Let us respect them and let us be responsible. Thank you, and I hand over to Rita. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Thank you, James. That's very, very important. So I would like to say also a special welcome to children, including child-led organizations and groups who are joining us today. We also like to thank the Swedish government support through the African Children's Charter Project. We call it ACCP in short, and through the Save the Children's Civil Society Strengthening Program for supporting all the work in collaboration with civil society actors, including child-led organizations and groups around the world, and especially in Africa. And to make sure that the right to child to a healthy, clean, and sustainable environment remains a priority. We'd also like to thank CEDA for funding the simultaneous interpretation for this webinar, which is very important because we would like to ensure everyone can come together, can be able to share experience and engage in this very important meeting. So now back to why we're here today. Again, welcome to all of you joining us in today's peer exchange webinar on environment, including climate action with children through the African Children's Charter's monitoring and reporting process. We will listen to experiences about children's environment in the African Charter's monitoring process. We'll also learn from each other on how we can better engage and more effectively integrate environmental climate-related issues affecting children's rights in the process. We'll also be launching 2 case studies, very interesting case studies from Ivory Coast, which show how our dear colleagues in Ivory Coast have done this integration of climate and environmental issues in reporting, monitoring and reporting processes. So the webinar is organized in collaboration with the How to Child Rights series and involved consortium members of the African Children's Charter Project and partners in the CEDA-funded Civil Society Strengthening Program. It's also done in collaboration with members of the Child Rights Connect working group on children's rights and environment. So I would like to say thank you very much. As you might have seen from the concept note shared already, the overall aim of this webinar is to inspire the civil society, including child-led groups, to integrate climate change and environmental issues in their complementary reports to the African Committee of Experts by sharing good practices, challenges, and lessons based on their lived experiences. The webinar also aims to encourage African Union human rights bodies and other institutions of relevance to children's rights to further consider climate change and environmental questions in children's views in their work. So on the agenda today, we will first ask you to connect to menti.com to answer some questions and to know who is with us today. We will then have the opening remarks from Honorable Aver Gavar, who is the Deputy Chairperson of the African Children's Committee or the African Committee of Experts on the Right and Welfare of the Child. Then we will have Sam Rawitz from the committee's secretariat, who will be telling us more about the charter, the committee, and the special mechanisms as well. Then following Sam Rawit, we will hear from Dr. Elvis Fokala, who is the external expert of the committee's working group on children's rights and climate change. And he will be sharing with us about the committee's monitoring and reporting processes from a climate change and participation angle. Then we will go to the very interesting part of the webinar. We'll go to the Ivory Coast to hear experiences from Save the Children, the Association of Working Children and Youth of Ivory Coast, the Child Rights Coalition of Ivory Coast, and these CSOs on how they engaged with the Charter's monitoring system on child participation in environmental issues. They will also tell us about the case studies that they have developed and that we will be launching today. So there will be, please note that there will be adequate time for interactive discussions, question and answer afterwards. So now, without further ado, I will proceed. I will now invite Daniel to present the Mentimeter questions. Daniel, over to you, please.
Thank you so much, Rita. I don't know if you can hear me clearly.
I can hear you clearly and loud. Yes.
Okay. Just turning on my camera. Thank you, everyone, and welcome to this meeting. My name is Daniel, IT at Save the Children Regional Office in Kenya, Nairobi. And I'll be presenting the Mentimeter today. Let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see, Daniel.
Okay, 1 minute. Okay. Okay. So thank you so much, Zambia. I see everyone is really psyched up to add their countries. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sweden. Thank you, Japan. Thank you, USA. So Mentimeter is a collaboration tool. So you can use the link menti.com and use the code that shows up there, 77351073, to log in where you're joining us from, and we will appreciate. Thank you so much, Cote d'Ivoire. Please don't shy away. Represent your country, your region. Thank you, Malawi. Thank you, Netherlands. Thank you, guys. Thank you, South Africa. Thank you, Rwanda. Lesotho, I see you. USA, Sierra Leone. Thank you, Germany. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you so much. If anyone I haven't mentioned, please feel welcome. We'll proceed to the next, let's see, question. Thank you so much for, yes, thank you. Keep sharing your location as we proceed to, thank you, Senegal, thank you, Nigeria, as we proceed to the next question. I think we'll come back here to see more responses. Yeah, so how are you feeling today? Amazing, good. Excited and grateful, good. Stressed, why? Why would you feel stressed in this beautiful day? Passionate, thank you. Hopeful, marvelous, thank you. Feeling happy, super. Thank you. Tired but good. Yeah, it's at the end of the year. I can imagine the kind of work that everyone is having as the year winds down. Thank you so much. Curious, hopeful, excited, great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your responses. Thank you, thank you. Feeling good, hopeful, wonderful. Thank you so much. If you're having any challenges with Menti, please also let me know as we proceed to the next question. Which topic mostly represent your area of work or activism? Child's rights, environment, or climate change. Please mute your mics. Thank you so much. Health. Environment. I see we have child rights really represented in this meeting. Thank you everyone for your responses. We really appreciate. We have 68 representatives here. Please feel free to chip in. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. As we proceed to the next question, remember we'll have this Mentimeter open, so your feedback will always be captured. Please mute. How would you rate your level of understanding of the monitoring and reporting process of the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Children? Thank you for your quick responses. Very good and experienced, good knowledge. We have 7 on medium knowledge, 2 on little knowledge. Amazing. Really appreciate your responses. Thank you, everyone. I'll keep this question for about 3 seconds, 2, 1, to the next. How would you rate your level of awareness about CSO and children environment or climate action through the ACRWC? Thank you for the responses. Thank you so much. Three, 2, 1. And I believe this will be the last question for this session.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, please. So, as I said, everyone, we will keep this Mentimeter open and your responses will still be captured. So feel free to respond as the session goes by. Apart from that, thank you for being an amazing audience and have a good meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Namid. That was brilliant.
Thank you.
So now it's my distinguished honor and privilege to invite Honorable Avar Gavar. Honorable Gavar is the Deputy Chairperson of the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, and she's also the chair of the working group on children's rights and climate change with the committee. So Honorable Gavar, you may take the floor, please.
Okay. Am I audible? Thank you very much, Rita.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, and to the organizers. Good afternoon, colleagues. I think I will start by craving your indulgence for my appearance. I just came back from the awareness walk to mark the Human Rights Day, hence my appearance. And having said that, I want to thank all of you for this opportunity. And so here I give my remarks in my capacity. And distinguished guests, colleagues, members of the civil society and child-led organizations and participants, it is indeed a great honor to welcome you to this critical webinar on civil society and children's engagement in the reporting and monitoring process of the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, the Charter, in the context of climate change. The gathering comes as a pivotal moment when the intersection of children's rights, climate change, and environmental justice demands our urgent attention and action. And the committee reiterates that climate change is one of the most critical child protection challenges in Africa, adversely impacting a wide range of rights recognized in the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, the Charter. In that regard, the committee decided to establish the Working Group on Children's Rights and Climate Change to raise awareness about the adverse disproportionate impact of climate change on children in Africa and to promote the integration of child rights-based approach to climate action in the continent, with a view to addressing the multifaceted negative impact on children's rights and welfare. There is no doubt that climate change disproportionately burdens children in Africa, threatening their rights to health, education, food, protection from violence, life, indeed the whole spectrum of human rights. So severe and elongated droughts, sudden floods, heat stress, air pollution, environmental degradation, increasing water scarcity, and exacerbation of food insecurity, among others, continue to take their toll on child morbidity and child mortality. Cognizant of this, the working group decided to launch a campaign to ensure a coherent and effective implementation of its activities and to further amplify the urgent call for a child rights-based approach to climate action. The name of the campaign is 1.1 Too High, a child rights-based approach to climate action in Africa. The slogan of the campaign, which is 1.1 Too High, serves as a needed reminder that the current level of global warming of 1.1 degrees, as compared to the pre-industrial levels, adversely affects the lives and livelihoods and therefore the rights of millions of children in Africa. Distinguished guests, colleagues, members of the civil society and child aid organizations, the mandate of the committee and that of its working group continues to be more relevant as the climate crisis worsens unabated. Not to mention the fact that the causal factors too are not abating either. So despite the multitude of efforts exerted globally to address climate crisis, we are still woefully far from meeting climate goals, with devastating projections to life on our planet. Moreover, the impacts of climate change that are already being felt today are getting more and more severe. And so today we aim to deepen our collective understanding on how the civil society, the child-led organizations and institutions can collaborate to address these challenges. The discussion is an opportunity to learn from experiences such as the remarkable child-led and CSO reported initiatives from Ivory Coast, and to explore ways to integrate children's perspectives more systematically into the African Charter on the Rights of Children's processes. Children are not merely victims of climate crisis, they are agents of change as well. And so through initiatives and campaigns like the 1.1 Too High campaign, we emphasize the need to amplify their voices in decision-making processes, ensuring their best interests remain central to all climate and environmental policies. I would like to underscore, on behalf of the committee, the importance of leveraging frameworks like the General Comment number 26 of the UNCRC and Resolution 18/2022 of the African Committee, as well as the campaign 1.1 Too High, to advocate for urgent measures and guide states in embedding child rights into climate action and response. I therefore encourage all participants to engage actively, to share insights, to compare notes and draw inspiration from case studies and peer learning opportunities we explore. Thank you for being part of this vital conversation. Thank you for the opportunity to present these remarks of mine. Have a wonderful celebration. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Gafar, for your succinct remarks and also for gracing us with your presence today. So thank you so much. Now, I would like to invite Ms. Samrawit Gaitana. Samrawit is a Senior Child Rights Protection Officer with the African Committee of Experts Secretariat. So Samrawit, you can take the floor now.
Thank you very much, Rata. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
If I may be excused to not turn on my
That's
video,
fine.
it's been the audio for me. Thank you so much.
That's fine.
Good afternoon, everyone. and representatives of different organizations, and especially children. It's my pleasure today to take you through briefly about the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child and the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, and briefly highlight some of the connections with climate change. And I know that you will hear more in detail about that subsequently. The next slide, please. So the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child is a regional human rights treaty, specifically focusing on the rights of children in Africa. It's the only regional mechanism in the world, meaning that we have the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Aside from that, Africa is the only region with its own dedicated child rights treaty. So far, this treaty has been ratified by 51 African countries, the 4 remaining one being Morocco, Tunisia, South Sudan, and Somalia. And hopefully they will also ratify, making it a universal ratified instrument. It contains 31 substantive provisions, including socioeconomic rights, but also civil and political rights in a coherent manner. It has unique features, such as the definition of the child. It defines the child as anyone under the age of 18 without any exception. It prohibits recruitment of children for military purposes without any exception. It also prohibits child marriage or the marriage of any child under the age of 18, as well as betrothal of children. It prohibits harmful practices that are harmful to the physical, psychosocial, and cultural development of the child. It protects internally displaced children, in addition to refugee children. And it also provides for responsibilities of the child. In addition to having rights in the Charter, children have responsibilities that are, I'm here reading that my voice is inaudible. Is it for everyone?
It's audible, Samrai. It's a little bit breaking, but we're fine. We are able to hear you. Yeah.
All right, then maybe I'll just be louder and continue. The Charter also establishes the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, specifically to monitor the implementation of the Charter in countries that have ratified it. The next slide, please. These are the key mandates of the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. The first one is the state Charter consideration. Every state that has ratified the Charter should report on the measures taken to implement each and every substantive provision of the Charter 2 years after ratifying it. So they have to submit a report saying what have they done on the best interest of the child, on non-discrimination, on the right to education, and so on and so forth. And every 3 years thereafter, states are supposed to report to the committee. The committee, of course, also hears from alternative sources, such as civil societies, children, to complement the report of the state party and to make sure that it has all the information and has a balanced approach. The other mechanism is the individual complaint or communication mechanism, in which individuals, civil societies, children can bring cases alleging violation of the provisions of the Charter to the committee's consideration. In this instance, the committee acts like a court. That's why we say it has a quasi-judicial function. It acts like a court and oversees the communication and gives its decision and recommendation whether or not the country has violated the Charter, and if so, what kind of measures it should undertake to remedy the violation. The committee also undertakes investigation, on-site investigation, promotion, and monitoring to make sure that it has direct information directly from the country's communities and children affected by various children's protection issues. Finally, the committee has a mandate to interpret the Charter. By this, it has this mandate to come up with general comments. What we call general comments are authoritative interpretations of the Charter. So if any of the provisions of the Charter need to be interpreted, the committee does so, and its interpretation has authority as mandated to monitor the Charter. Next slide, please. So just to look at the special mechanisms of the Charter, since today we will be talking about the issue of climate change, the committee has established various working groups and special rapporteurs on thematic areas that it deems to be key for child protection in the continent. It has 4 working groups, and from those 4 working groups, one of them is a working group on children's rights and climate change. It consists of 8 members. 4 of them are members of the committee, while the rest are external experts, which can provide additional expertise to the work of the working group. Next slide, please. So I will not say much about this because the next presenter will go into detail, but to let you know that climate change affects various rights recognized in the Charter. And there is a direct, most of the time direct, but sometimes indirect link with various provisions of the Charter. The right to health under Article 40 is affected by the spread of disease, malnutrition, increase in water and vector-borne diseases, and so on. The right to education is affected by displacement owing to slow and sudden climate events. The right to survival and development, again, by various factors. The right to play and recreation with the creation of unsafe environments and displacement is disrupted. The right to protection, climate change severely exacerbates resource scarcity, and this in turn leads to child protection issues such as exploitation, trafficking, harmful practices. The right to participation, the best interest of the child are all affected. And the committee has interpreted the obligations of states under Article 1. And in doing so, it has stated that the best interest of the child actually has short-term, medium-term, and long-term implications, including long-term environmental protection aspects. So climate change and its impacts are adversely contrary to the short-term, but also the long-term best interest of the child. Next slide, please. The working group on children's rights and climate change was established through a resolution, and it has a wide mandate of promotion and advocacy, standard setting, receiving and acting on communication, and undertaking investigative work. So far, it has undertaken various activities. One of the key ones is the resolution on child rights-based approach to climate action, in which the working group calls for various stakeholders to take a child rights-based approach in various ways in which they are tackling climate change. So this is important. But also, as Honorable Aber highlighted, the working group has launched a campaign called 1.12 High, the child-based rights-based approach to climate action in Africa. And 1.12 High signifies the fact that even though the world is trying to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees, in the current 1.1 level of warming, African children are bearing the brunt of the consequence of climate change. So we shouldn't wait until that goal is fulfilled. We have to act now and urgently. In addition to that, the working group submits various briefings and submissions to various organs to make sure that the voices of African children are heard. Next, please. Engaging with the committee on the topic of climate change. There are various ways to engage with the committee on the topic of climate change, and I invite all stakeholders here, especially children, but also civil society organizations, to make use of these various mandates and systematically engage with the working group. Next slide, please. So through the state party reporting and consideration mechanism, civil societies and also children, in coordination, of course, with civil societies, can produce complementary reports based on the state report. So in this process, it's important to ensure that under each and every provision that is affected through climate change, evidence is brought directly from the ground and from children on how the different rights are affected by climate change. But in addition to one complementary report, children and civil societies can also send specific briefings on how specific rights are affected by climate change. In terms of the individual complaints and communication mandate, again, so far there is no case brought to the committee or other bodies in the African Union, but it's important to think of in what way children's rights are being affected and how that can be brought in a form of a case or communication to the committee. and children have a standing in front of the committee, and they can bring cases directly to the committee. In the investigation and promotion mandate as well, it's possible for civil society and children to request for investigation, to assist in monitoring mandate of the committee, or to submit briefings when the committee conducts investigation. Next slide, please. So just to highlight, key to a successful engagement with the committee will be first and foremost to identify the mode of engagement suitable to the specific cause that you are trying to advance, to comply with the relevant guiding documents. You can find all the documents of the committee on the website of the committee, to coordinate and enhance reach. So those who have resources, those who have expertise, and those who have on-the-ground knowledge should coordinate together, and to take note of the resolutions, recommendations, and jurisprudence of the committee. So if all these are combined, we can overcome some of the challenges of engagement and have a successful engagement. I think this is my last slide, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Samrit, for that excellent introduction to the Charter Committee, its special mechanisms, and how children in CSOs can engage with the committee on particularly on child rights and climate change issues. Thank you. Thank you so much. Now I would invite my dear colleague, Dr. Elvis Fokala, who is, among other things, of course, a professor at the University of Pretoria, but he's also the external expert for the working group on children's rights and climate change that Samrit earlier mentioned, and to talk about the committee's reporting process from climate change and child participation angle. So Elvis, you are very much welcome. You may take the floor, please.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you so much for leading us through this process. Et bonjour à tout le monde qui est là. Bon, j'aimerais d'abord dire que si vous avez des questions en français à poser, vous pouvez poser en français.
If you have any questions in French, you can just ask the question, because I'll do my presentation in English. But if you have a question in French, you can really ask your question in French, and I'll respond to it.
French participants, they are welcome to ask those questions in French, and I'm glad that I see some translation taking place, that we can easily have that conversation. So my presentation is not as flowery as my boss's, ACERWC, in terms of how she tabulated everything and speaks to the things the way they play out. What I want to speak to, and I've seen all the talking points that I've been given, is that I want to relate three things, just three things. The first is the impact or the adverse effects of climate change on the rights or certain rights that ACERWC has mentioned just now. That is the first thing that we want to speak to. The second thing is to see the extent to which we can, focus on the specific provision that speaks about child participation in the African Children's Charter, and that is Article 4 sub 2. Do not mistake that. It's 4 sub 2. 4 sub 1 is best interest, and 7 is freedom of expression. But 4 sub 2, in my opinion, is the provision that actually captures succinctly the issue of child participation. The rest are just family members of that tree. The third thing that I want to speak to, which of course relates to everything else that speaks out to the solution points that I've been given, is looking at the future. How do we work with children? How do we involve children in the research or what we do when it comes to issues around climate change, in order to get results that are child-friendly and results that speak to the issues that we are dealing with right now. But before I do that, I want to highlight very briefly the things that the committee has done. Some Honorable Avas mentioned, others, my very good friend and boss, ACERWC, has also mentioned just now. But I want to spotlight the issue, the study on climate change that we have in the making. The reason why the committee embarked on that study and why it is important for us. You've all seen General Comment 26. You've all seen the extent to which the UN CRC committee has elaborated on the relationship or the interlinks between climate change and children's rights. You've seen that in that. But what you haven't seen, most of you, is the relation that it links with the African context. How do we experience it in Africa? So the study from Ivory Coast is just, in my opinion, a little drop in the ocean of what plays out in Ivory Coast and with countries close to Ivory Coast and everything. But in the broader context of the continent, the study that we have at the committee level, it's a study that I think, and I believe very strongly, will give a broader picture of what plays out in the continent. Just as a way of example, one clear example, here, when we are affected by climate change, in most instances, when schools are being swept away by climate flooding, when schools are swept away by climate strong winds and everything, there are no programs, there are not structured programs to provide satellite education institutions where children can temporarily, continuously access their right to education. So that becomes a problem. In the sense that climate change comes in to, one, interrupt the enjoyment of certain rights. And that is something you need to take very seriously, because that is the entry point of where children's rights come into it. When the UN recognized environmental rights, the right to the environment, including climate change as a fundamental human right, we had been experiencing it in the children's rights space in a different way. The experience that we have had in the children's rights space, it has been at the level of the impact of that natural disaster on the enjoyment of rights, and not at the point of claiming those rights. But the fact that we have been enjoying our rights, and this climate change has now affected the rights. A clear example is what happened in Malawi. In Malawi in 2023, 2022, 2023, we had strong, climate-induced hurricane that came all the way from Mozambique. And that swept away most parts of Southern Africa and sort of affected Malawi, Blantyre, a lot, in a way that, it affected schools and also affected children's access to education. The children were put into a community hall together with their families, and at some point they had classes on the side. Now, that is not proper education. We all know that. The next example is climate-induced heat that we also experienced or known that happened in South Sudan. When that happened in South Sudan, and I have to say as a caveat, it's not only in South Sudan. There are reports that indicate that it happens as well in Mali, in Senegal, and many other countries. So when climate-induced heat happened in these countries, what happened in these countries is that the government asked these children to go home, those who were in school. And in my opinion, again, these are instances where the government has no resolution or no solution to these issues. These are just brief examples, and we know what happened in Kenya, and issues around the right to food, issues around the high right to health, and all of these things are interlinked and how they impact. But to what extent is Africa making, or Africa in particular, together with the committee, making inroads to provide solutions to some of these issues? One of our major problems is that we do not have a climate, oriented curriculum. Most of our schools do not have a climate syllabi or syllabus in one instance that will reflect, teach children from a very young age how to mitigate climate emergencies. So we don't have that. So our first reaction is mostly protective. So when it happens, because we have no solutions, we have no knowledge to what, I mean children in this case, we don't have any knowledge of it. The first thing is that they run. They try to, it is more reactive to what happens. But I think if we have a system that educates from primary school levels and builds up, we will be able to provide mitigating circumstances that will, to a very good extent, incapacitate children in Africa to start building climate resilient approaches on how we mitigate climate change, on as well how to resist it when it happens, just like we do with conflict, isn't it? But so from that introductory setting, these are some of the issues that led the committee, or that encouraged the committee to now do a study. The study, in my opinion, simply highlights or strengthens what I've just told you now, spotlights in a very strong way some of these issues, And the study goes further to propose recommendations and to propose solutions, both at the regional level, the sub-regional level, and the national level. At the national level, one of the key things that you can find in the study will be at the point of legislation and regulation, some of these issues. So one of the regulations that one anticipates governments will do, or that governments, be that in Cote d'Ivoire, in Senegal, Mali, Niger, Togo, Ethiopia, and whichever country in the continent, one of the key regulations that they should take into consideration is how to encourage institutions of learning, to involve or to incorporate climate education. And for me, this will be aligned with Article 12 of the UNFCCC. This will also be aligned with Article 6, rather Article 6 of the UNFCCC and Article 12 of the Paris Agreement. It will all be aligned because those two provisions, they speak about the importance of climate education and the importance of teaching climate in schools. So if that is done, I think there will be an alignment and there will be a build-up of knowledge right from the start. Most of us never experienced climate change during our time, but we are living with it and we find it difficult to control it because we didn't have the right education right from the start. So I think that would be a very good thing to have. The next point that I want to now, get into, which I would like you to look at very carefully, is that how do we get children now involved in this process? How do we, besides education, how do we get children involved in the process of finding solutions to this adverse effect? There are problems. We know that. Pretoria, South Africa, for example, Pretoria in particular, and Johannesburg, is just experiencing the hottest time of his life, where we sit with 38 degrees, 37 degrees a day, and today is not different with 37 degrees in Johannesburg. That is excessive. And 2 months ago, out of the blue, we had snow, massive snow in Lesotho and in South Africa that you can't even understand where it all came from. These are all, in my opinion, if climate change was a human being, you will easily say that climate change is mentally deranged, where you have a mixture of mental inabilities or thinking. But the extent to which we get children, the good news is that the committee has a guideline on child participation. And the guideline is as generous as everything else that you could think of. The guideline was built up, just immediately after the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child had adopted and actually almost finalized the process of GC26. So because the committee does not replicate what the UNCRC committee has done, what the committee did in this case was to provide a guideline that is Afrocentric, that is specific to the mandate of the committee, and that also speaks to the extent to which children can be involved, incorporated in different issues. In different issues that work in a space. So the committee provides about 5 pillars. They said 1, identify the children. 2, invite them to the process. 3, inform them of the situation and what happens in that process of involving them. 4, allow them to speak so that they can express their opinion and what they think can be a solution. And 5, in deciding on the solution, that the children are involved in that process. These 5 pillars, they're extremely important in the processes which the committee identifies in its guideline on child participation and how you involve the countries. The guideline, of course, speaks to the work of the committee, but if you read it in depth, you'll find that it can also be, absorbed by the government. It can be absorbed by civil society organizations, and that institutions such as yours as well in Cote d'Ivoire and many other countries, that you can absorb these processes. The committee, has not engaged fully, but for what someone I would mention now, engaged fully with the works of with children on the same issue. But we have good news for you in the sense that during the next session, the working group on children and climate change will have an engagement with children. We'll have an engagement with children during which it will broadly and sort of precisely speak to the issues of climate change. And I think for me, this is a measure victory for the committee. And what happens after that, I could just see communications coming to the committee because the committee has not received a single communication on climate change. And let's hope these conversations will ignite more of this. Thank you so much, Rita.
Thank you so much, Elvis. I know you have a lot more to share, and you are constrained by time, but we'll make sure you'll get time later on as well. If you have any questions for Dr. Elvis, please share it through the Q&A in chat box, and Elvis will be very happy to address them either through chat or later on. Thank you, Elvis, again. So now it is time to hear from children in child-led organizations in Ivory Coast on their experiences, particularly on reporting on climate change and environment issues to the CRC, the committee, and other mechanisms. So first, we'll hear from our colleague from SAVE Ivory Coast, Angie, who will tell us briefly about the case that is developed by ACERWC in Ivory Coast. So Angie, you have the floor, please. 2 minutes.
Merci, cher modérateur. Bonjour à tous.
Thank
Bonjour à
you,
tous. Je suis Kofi Ange.
moderator.
Je
Good
suis
morning,
chargé
everyone.
de
I'm actually
programme,
Kofi Ange. I
pour
am in
les
charge of
droits de
program,
l'enfant et
and
renforcement de
actually
la
the
société civile dans le
where
cadre du programme
I mean
ProCiv. Et je
the
travaille à ACERWC en
can
Côte
he
d'Ivoire.
speak loudly,
Il faut
please?
dire que mon
Alors,
intervention,
I want to
juste
say
une
my
introduction
intervention is just an
avant la
introduction
présentation
of
proprement
before the
dite des
presentation
études de cas qui ont été
on the
réalisées
two
dans
cases
le
that we
cadre
have been realized
justement de l'intégration des
in
questions de changement
order to
climatique
integrate
et d'environnement en lien avec les droits de l'enfant
climate change
dans
and
les mécanismes de
environment
surveillance
with
ce qui
the right
concerne la Charte
to
africaine des droits
the
et du
right of
bien-être
children
des enfants.
in what is the Charter of
Il faut dire qu'au
Africa
niveau de la
of
Côte
the
d'Ivoire, c'est un
welfare of the
processus
children. In Ivory Coast, it's a procedure. It's actually interactive and participative. It implicates so many organizations from the civil society and very specific attention to children organization. And now we'll have the presentation of Makil Hen, who is that child, who is that person who participated in that procedure so that the climate change and children's rights will be integrated. So my first experience was, I think we have to talk about experience, because from that experience, we have two things that we have to consider here. And the first thing is the capacity that the Ivory Coast has today to integrate the question of climate change and the rights of children. And the second, it's actually the accompaniment that we have to allow children to be capacitated to put together procedures and solutions that will help them to represent that, the situation and come up with different mechanisms that can be used in different contexts of Africa, and for them to contribute in different committees. So I don't want to be long. I just wanted to give that introduction and to say thank you to the mechanism of chat right, which actually accompanied us from this procedure from the beginning. They, for example, give us the tools that allowed us to evaluate or appreciate the question of climate change. I talk about the tools that we've used and adapted to the African context when we were doing our report in terms of climate change and on how to integrate children into that. So I'm so thankful to all the partners that have contributed to all the production of all these tools. Thank you very much. And I have to give the floor to Makin for the following.
Thank you, Kofi. Thank you. So now I'm pleased to invite Maki Lel, who is a 17-year-old national delegate from the Association of Working Children and Youth of Ivory Coast, to talk about children's leadership in the Charter's reporting process. You may proceed, Marc. Very much welcome.
Marc, vous pouvez continuer. Vous êtes les bienvenus.
Bonsoir à tous.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Bonsoir à tous.
Good afternoon.
Vous m'entendez?
Oui, bonsoir.
Can you hear me, please?
Bonsoir, Makelel. On t'entend très bien.
Makelel, on t'entend.
Yeah, we can hear you. We can
Bonsoir
hear
encore. Je suis
you very
Makelel
well.
Denis, délégué
I am
national de
Makelel Denis.
l'Association des enfants et jeunes travailleurs de
I
Côte d'Ivoire.
come from
J'ai
the
17 ans
Association
et
of
aujourd'hui, je prends la
Children.
parole
I
au
have
nom de tous
17
les
years,
enfants de
and
Côte
today I'm
d'Ivoire.
actually taking the floor for all
Aujourd'hui,
the
il y a un
children
thème
in
bien
Ivory
précis qui nous
Coast,
rassemble tous
and we
dans ce
have
webinaire,
a
la
theme which is
question
very
du changement
precise.
climatique
Is
et
the
des droits de
question
l'homme.
of climate change and the
Ici, en
rights
Côte
of
d'Ivoire,
children.
nous avons
In
produit deux
here
rapports.
in Ivory Coast,
C'est que
we've
la
actually
CAD
produced some reports
qui est la Charte africaine des droits et du bien-être de l'enfant,
which
et
actually
l'EPE,
relative to
qui est
the
les
rights,
agences
the
périodiques
Charter of
universelles. Et
Africa
dans
and
ces deux
the rights
rapports-là,
of
nous avons
children.
intégré
And
la
in
question
those two
du
reports,
changement
we
climatique
integrated the question of
et
climate
aussi
change
avancer les
and
recommandations afin
announce the
d'améliorer la situation des
recommendations
enfants afin que ce phénomène
in order for us to
puisse
change the
trouver une
situation
solution.
in our environment as
Mais ce
children
travail
and
ne pourrait
find
pas se
some
faire sans
solution.
l'implication des
That
enfants.
work could
Pour
not
ce
be
faire, nous
done
avons
without the
impliqué
implication of
les enfants sans
children.
distinction,
That's
y
why we
compris les enfants en
implicated all
situation
the
de handicap,
children without
parce
distinction,
que eux aussi
including
sont
the
les plus
children living with
touchés dans ce
disabilities,
contexte de
because
changement
even
climatique dans le
them,
monde.
they are very
Nous
much
avons
touched in
touché
this context of
plusieurs
climate
villes de la
change.
Côte d'Ivoire,
We've
nord,
actually
sud, un peu partout, afin d'avoir une
we've gone
représentativité
into so many regions in
effective.
Ivory Coast,
Et pour
north,
travailler sur
south,
cette
and
question de
east and
changement
west,
climatique
to
et droits
work
de
on
l'enfant,
this question of
nous avons utilisé
climate
une
change and
série
children's rights.
qui
We've
nous a permis
used
d'avancer
a
des
tool called
arguments plus
multi-series,
pertinents sur cette
which
question-là.
actually allows us
Et
to
cet
give
outil-là
our
a été
perspective, and that
élaboré en
tool
version
has been
user-friendly pour nous
elaborated
permettre de mieux
with
comprendre les
the
questions
Chandel
qui
book.
sont
It actually
intégrées.
allowed us to
Et
understand the
aujourd'hui, grâce à
questions
cet outil, nous avons
which
pu
are related to integration.
produire ce rapport dans lequel nous avons
So we
intégré
produced
la
that
thématique
report
changement
where
climatique
we
que nous
talked
avons
about
présenté devant le
the
comité des
thematic
experts
of
afin qu'ils
climate
puissent
change. So
vraiment
we
avancer nos
integrated some
différentes
experts
recommandations
so
devant
that they
l'État de
can
Côte
talk
d'Ivoire.
about our different point of view in our state, Ivory
Lors
Coast.
de ces consultations avec des enfants,
When we
plusieurs
did the
questions sont ressorties.
consultation with those children, so
Et ces
many questions
questions-là,
were actually
c'était les
asked,
suivants. D'abord,
and those
quelles sont les
questions
différentes actions de l'État
they were
concernant le
asking,
changement climatique que nous
what are
connaissons?
the different questions
Aussi,
that
quelles sont les
the
personnes les
state
plus
is
touchées?
taking
Et
against
quand nous avons regardé notre contexte ici en Côte
climate
d'Ivoire, on
change.
a vu que
So
nous
here
sommes
in
les
Ivory
plus
Coast,
exposés sur
we
cette question du
saw
changement
that we are
climatique.
so
Mais
much
les actions
exposed to
pour
this
lutter
question
contre
of
ce phénomène-là sont
climate
un
change,
peu
but the question, I mean, the
restreint. Il n'y
actions
a pas assez d'actions
which are
pour
supposed to be
pouvoir nous
taken
aider à lutter
to
contre ce
mitigate
phénomène.
this climate
Raison pour
change
laquelle dans
were
ces deux
not
rapports, nous avons
adequate.
intégré cette
So
question de changement
we've
climatique.
integrated
Pour présenter cela devant le
our
comité,
question
le
of
comité a
climate
vraiment
change in
apprécié
those
les différents
reports.
arguments que
So
nous
the
avons eu à
committee
avancer
appreciated the different
parce que
arguments
ces
that we
arguments
put
étaient dans un
forward
premier temps
because those
pertinents
arguments
et nous les
were
avons
very
exprimés
pertinent,
dans
and
notre
we
langage
expressed
en
them
fonction de
in
notre
our
situation et dans le
languages
contexte dans lequel nous
considering
nous trouvons.
our situation and
Au
in the
sortir de ces
context in
consultations,
which
nous avons appris
we are.
certaines leçons,
During those
des leçons
consultations,
qui
we
vont à
learned
jamais
so
rester
many
gravées dans notre
lessons.
mémoire sur cette question
Those
du changement
lessons will
climatique.
be
Nous
engraved in
espérons
our
que
hearts, and we hope
le comité africain des experts
that
qui
the
est dans ce
committee
webinaire
of
va
experts,
continuer à nous accompagner
African
dans le
experts,
processus
will
de prise de
continue to
nouvelles
help us in these
concernant le changement
procedures
climatique.
and
Les
they put
leçons
together
apprises
mechanism
durant
to
ces consultations et
mitigate
approches sur ce rapport,
climate
c'est que
change.
nous avons la
And
capacité de nous exprimer
we
sur cette
have the
question du
capacity to
changement climatique
express
parce que nous sommes les plus
ourselves in
exposés,
that
comme je le
in
disais
the
tantôt.
question
Et aussi,
related to
l'État
climate change because we are the people
a une
who are much
oreille à nous
exposed.
prêter. L'État
So,
nous écoute dans tout
you
ce que
know,
nous faisons, car au travers de
we
ces
actually
actions qui
urge
suivent
the
les
government
recommandations,
to listen us
dernièrement, le rapport que
to
nous
whatever thing we are
proposons qui est
doing,
sorti,
which
nous
is
avons pu
related to climate
intégrer la
change.
question de
We have
participation
to,
des enfants
they have to
dans le
integrate
processus
the question of
d'élaboration ou de
children in
planification
the
d'activités
procedure of
concernant le
elaboration
changement
or
climatique.
a
On
plan
dit que
of
nous ne sommes pas
activities
illimités,
which have to
nous avons
mitigate
notre avis
climate change.
sur
We
cette
have
question de changement
our point of
climatique
view.
et nous
We
pouvons aider les
know
différents États et les
what
différentes
to
parties
say
prenantes
in
à
terms
pouvoir
of
trouver
climate
des
change. We want to participate
résultats
so that
plus ou moins
we
concrets.
can actually get the
Aussi,
outcome
ça nous
which
a
are
donné la
concrete.
capacité de
And
pouvoir
again, to give us the
montrer notre
capacity
leadership
to show our leadership to prove, because we have actually put together so many activities, so many conventions, so many workshops to enhancement of capacity, and we have realized the CAP 29 so that we can see, we can show to the state of Ivory Coast that we as children, we can actually be implicated in the climate change and the environment. That's what I wanted to share with you in terms of climate change in Ivory Coast and some realization that we've done. That's actually, I'm actually here. If you have any questions, I will be glad to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. That was excellent. And thank you so much for sharing your experience. Definitely, we will come back to you later with questions from the audience. Thank you, Mark. Now I would like to invite Augustine, who is the director of the Child Rights Coalition of Ivory Coast. Augustine will tell us about their experience integrating climate change and environment issues in the charters, the Children's Charter reporting process. So, Augustine, you have the floor, please.
Okay, merci et bonsoir à toutes et à
Thank
tous.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. I am Kaku Augustine. I am a director of, executive director of the Forum of NGOs. In the same spirit of what Mark has said, we have to say that the Forum of NGOs is there to protect children. The Forum enter in the protection of children, and so many times I've actually produced a report to the committee and even to the African Charter to the right, the right of children. Those are the NGOs that have an idea, and all the society of civil society, they have integrated the question of environment and climate change. The idea came from, we have to say, when we wrote our report, we had so many initiatives, or let's say so many cases in Ivory Coast. We have so many flooding, so many people children who died during the flooding, and we had a drought in Ivory Coast. All these aspects were considered, and we had as well the question of the tool series, which was available. We brought that tool to the redaction that they could consider the question related to environment and climate change. In that report, we have so many elements which are enumerated there. As I said, in our context, you can see, those the pile of, small things which are there that actually threaten the health of children, their health and their welfare. The situation which has been seen in towns and in rural area. So why OSA has integrated the climate change and the environment? As I said, we had a different reason. We have difficulty in our forestries that's led to drought. So we have to retain that when we were putting together this report, some NGOs were talking about the mechanism on integration of children in Ivory Coast in terms of protection. And in the programs, we have to say the question of environment were part of those teams from the beginning of that site. It gave an opportunity to the Forum of NGOs to integrate the question of environment in the procedure. So we were based on that series to present our questions. that we were supposed to consider in our report. So what was the procedure? What did we do to integrate the question of environment in our report? The first step is we prepared a tool of collection, collection tool. So we prepared that tool based on UTCA. We prepared another tool. As I said, based on a Siri tool, we created another tool that we could ask our question, ourselves question to integrate in the report. And again, in the procedure was the procedure with kids. We adapted all the tools to the children so that we could facilitate their understanding. And the support of IGT, we are feeling that contributed in the aspect of environment, and it's contributed immensely. And the third step was the phase of development, where to collected the data and how to analyze the data that we collected. Slide. So after the collect of data, those different information were synthesized, and from those information, we elaborated a report which was integrated the environment and climate change. We had recommendation for children and for the civil society. So that is the tool that was designed that allowed us to collect information in terms of environment. That is the tool that we've used. We have to say that in this report, we have to say this report has been put together with the help of more than 100 civil society organization, and so you can see the the graph that we have on how we integrated the participant who participated in the creation of that report. Here is the contribution of various. I just said it before. We can continue because I've spoke about this already. So here we have different report which represent a different information that we've gathered from the organization of civil society and element that we actually based our report in terms of children and in terms of the organization of civil society. So these information were collected from one side to the other, from children to the organization of civil society. What we have to retain, and with some numbers that we've put together, is that the report for the civil society organization, they recommended 6 recommendations for the environment and the climate change. And for the children, we had 24 recommendations that were put together for the question of environment and climate change. So here is to show you at the end, after we submitted the report, what was the result. So the final, which has reported to the expert, this is what we had in the state of Ivory Coast. From 143 recommendations, we retained 76 recommendation which were retained, and 48 which were retained, which this actually related to environment and climate change. And one recommendation which was retained is to enhance actions which are related to good environment, and for drinking water. That was the first time we've looked at the recommendation which were put in our cost. And the recommendation that I just read was actually written by the committee of experts, and we were so satisfied with that result, because for the first time we've had a result which was a recommendation for Ivory Coast. So as you can see some images, those are public actors. Those people are going to take in consideration all the recommendations, and to all the actors who are supposed to implement those recommendations, we have, these are the actors who are supposed to implement those recommendations. Yes. So now you can see, as I said, what we've put together. This is, I've said that because of time, and that is what we've put together in terms of environment and climate change. What we have to retain is to whomever does this initiative has to, to base himself to expert and to consider the environment and climate change. All these aspects have to be considered. Thank you very much. And the children of Ivory Coast, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Augustine. That was, again, another brilliant intervention. Thank you so much for the work you've done in terms of integrating climate-related issues in the reporting, in the monitoring and reporting process of the committee. Very systematic. I hope the participants will have a lot to ask or share their own experiences as well. So we really encourage you to now, we'll open it for Q&A. So please jot down your questions. If you have any questions, you can also raise your hands. And then we will allow you to speak. Maybe as an icebreaker, probably I would like to...
Quand je regarde le chrono, si je vais aller...
Is somebody speaking? Okay, so please kindly mute your microphones if you are not speaking. Thank you. So just to kickstart our discussion, probably to Mark. Mark, again, you are a star. I mean, that was excellent. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. But if I may ask, how did you feel after your engagement in the reporting process, Mark? Are you satisfied or are you not satisfied with the results, and why? Probably. Would you like to share your feelings after the engagement process in the reporting?
Après ce processus de rapportage, je peux dire qu'on est satisfait du résultat.
After this process of report, I am actually satisfied with the result, because it's us, the children who have put together the procedure. We've done even the consultation, the reduction, the sharing of experiences. It's new, actually, it's us who did that. So we've done everything. We've been actually accompanied by our, the elder persons, the committee of expertise. It was a good experience for us, because it's the first one. It was actually the first one for us as children to be in that procedure of report. So the committee was actually very proud They said it was even their first time, to have the children to present a report to them. So we are so proud because we are the first country in the East or the Western Africa to present a report. So today we can say we have tools, necessary tools to engage for the best which is coming. We have all the tools to do that procedure of report or to put together a report. So I can say we are so satisfied here in Ivory Coast. The procedure was looking at the results. We did it in a very short time, and we've seen the fruit of our different actions. So it will be beneficial for us and even for the coming generations. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Merci.
Thank you so much. Luis, is it a question to Mark? You can jump in now.
Merci. Merci.
Thank you.
C'est pas une question, mais c'est juste un
No, it's not a
compliment
question,
à la
but it's just a
réponse
compliment,
Marc Eliel. Et donc,
like
si
to what Mark
je suis
Eliel
au
has said.
bureau de Save the Children
Uh,
Côte d'Ivoire,
I am
pour
actually working with the Save the
accompagner
Children in Ivory Coast. I thank the Save the Children Ivory Coast,
au niveau
which actually
technique.
accompanied the processes
Donc,
at technical level.
également,
So
je
in the
vais dire
civil
avec une
society, I thank them.
recommandation
I
retenue,
have to give them a
satisfaite du
recommendation.
processus entièrement,
We are
mais
satisfied.
on aurait
We are
souhaité
not
plus
satisfied
de
completely with the
recommandations
procedure beyond the,
qui concernent la question
there's we have
environnementale.
some
Je
recommendation
voulais
that
juste
we
saisir
love probably to
l'opportunité
come up with.
pour
I
le
wish
processus
you a
et
good
l'examen périodique universel. Et nous
continuation
avons
for
également
this
inclus
procedure. We have included
recommandations sur les questions
some
environnementales
recommendation
et voir si
on
on peut
the question of
toujours
environment to see
opportunité
if
aux enfants
we can give the opportunity to the
s'exprimer en
children
masse
to
où il y aura
express
l'adoption de différentes
themselves
recommandations pour le
when
cas de Côte
there will
d'Ivoire.
come different
Et là,
recommendation
c'est une
for
réflexion que
Ivory
je
Coast.
lance
And that
puisqu'il y
is
a
just a thinking that I'm giving. We have
institutions
different
présentes sur cette
persons, different
plateforme
institutions
que nous
which are
pouvons
in this
réfléchir parce que en
platform
mars,
to think because
le
in
Conseil des droits de l'homme va donner
the Committee of Human Rights will give a final recommendation when it comes to Ivory Coast. So I think there is a project which is already in place, which is not yet adopted. So it will be question to do, some plaidoyer to insist on some recommendation which are related to the right of children and to the question of environment. So we see that we see so many recommendations coming out of that, which are related to environment. We want that to be considered in the recommendations. Yeah, that was my intervention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you. Thank you. That's duly noted. I see two more hands. So first, Morongo. My apologies if I mispronounce your name. Morongo, you can speak. Yeah. We can't hear. Morongo, are you there? I can see you're trying to speak.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now you are audible.
Okay.
Now you can
Thank
speak.
you. Okay.
Merci.
So I'm saying my question is directed to Professor Elpis in his presentation. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. He stated that the government has no resolution to this problem, let's say, of climate change. But then my question is, if now we don't really have the solution to this problem, what hope do we have in relation to addressing this problem adequately, especially looking into its impact on the rights of the children? And also, could we really trust forums like COP as well? If do we really say now we have no result to this problem? That's my question to him. Thank you.
Thank you, Morongo. Thank you. Virgilio?
Now I'm just raising the issue that there's in the chat, there's a question from Titus Wamai, and his question is, how did the committee ensure that the rights of children were captured in the just concluded CAP 29? Maybe that's a question that is a little bit off in the discussion, but I don't know, it's raised by Titus Wamai in the chat.
Thank you, Virgilio. I hope Elvis will address that as well. Thank you. So I don't see any hand. Are there any questions on the chats? My colleagues will help.
Rita, Elvis,
Yes,
Elvis has left the call. He told me that he had to leave. So perhaps you could try to address, or somebody else we can ask from the call who would like to intervene on this point.
Yes. Yes, we have Samrawit with us. So right time, Samrawit, you can take the floor now.
I just returned back to the call, but I've seen the question in the chat, so I will respond to the question in the chat. But I've missed the other question. Apologies. Regarding the involvement or the role of the committee in advocating for children at COP29, it's one of the activities that the working group was planning to undertake, was to actually attend this COP and advocate for the rights of children in Africa. However, due to resource constraints, it couldn't attend. But despite not being able to attend, the working group prepared a briefing for the meetings that took place prior to COP. As some of you may know, prior to COP, in around June, there was a meeting in Bonn, Germany, in preparation for the COP with the different subcommittees under the ACRWC. So the committee wrote a briefing, the working group specifically wrote a briefing outlining what the priorities should be for African children and how African children are being affected by climate change and how that connects with their rights, and gave recommendations. So this document was submitted to the UNFCCC Secretariat as well as the African Union Commission. Just to inform you, the African Union Commission is an observer to the UNFCCC.
J'ai maigri un peu de jours là.
Yes, Samrit, you can continue.
Okay. The African Union Commission is an observer, and the committee, being one of the organs of the African Union Commission, works together with the Commission to jointly address this kind of bodies. So this is the manner in which the committee tried to highlight the plights of African children in COP. As we know, the outcome of COP was disappointing from a human rights and child rights perspective, but this advocacy is something that the working group will continue to do. So the more information, the more grassroots evidence on the impact of climate change on children is brought to the committee, especially directly from children, the more the committee will be able to then package the voice of children directly and send a message to COP. So one of the key messages that the committee is trying to advocate to COP and other platforms is the prioritization of adaptation in Africa. Adaptation is key to address most of the challenges faced by African children and financing. So this has been the engagement so far. Perhaps the other question, if I'm able to address it, I can, but I didn't hear it. So maybe the person might repeat.
Yes, Samrit, thank you. We'll come back to that. Thank you so much for the response. Shall I quickly, yes, Kogmoso?
Thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon, colleagues, once again. And we appreciate the work that the committee is doing, particularly through their climate change working group. But I have a number of questions in relation to what has been presented. Firstly, and thank you, my colleague just alluded on the COP, but we've noted with great concern that the voices of African children in that forum at COP is invisible. And I want to know what is that the African Committee of Experts on the Right of the Child can do to ensure that there are some child-friendly processes that can enable children to participate. The accreditation for children, African children in particular, to participate at the COP is a nightmare. Those who were there, children from other regions came in numbers, but in Africa, it was just a pocket, and the problem was around the accreditation. That's number one. Number two, also, Africa, the AU hosted its inaugural AU climate summit, and it was heartening to see that children had civil society organization had to mobilize children and have the children's session taking place 100 kilometers away from the actual venue. Is there anything that the committee can do in relation to our child participation guidelines to ensure that the voices of the children are at the center, so that the CSO civil society organization don't have to fight to ensure that children are ahead? Lastly, I noted with great appreciation number of working groups within the African Committee. But the question I'm asking, is there any reason why we don't have a child-led working groups? We have a working group on climate change. Where are the voices of children in that working group? We have working group on child rights and business principle. Where are the voices of children on that working group? Because I think unless the African Committee of Experts lead child participation through its organs and mechanism, no one is going to take child participation seriously. So those are my questions, but then I appeal to say, as the African Committee, as the custodian, to ensure that as and when there is a working group, there is also children's working group that can work as advisory or that can always interface with the major working group. I submit, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kokmoso. Samright, I will give her a chance later on to reflect on some of these questions. Very important. Thank you. Mark, I saw your hand, so you can come in now. Mark from Ivory Coast.
Oui, c'est pour toujours répondre sur cette question de COP.
To answer to that question of COP, as I was saying, here in Ivory Coast, we've organized the COP 29. We were preparing for the big COP. One of our member in Ivory Coast is actually a platform that put together all the children organization in Ivory Coast. We had a representative who went and represent our recommendation during the preparation of COP29. So I took the opportunity to bring different, different representative of the committee. So to have to facilitate the participation of many children in such kind of event, to share the experience that they had in their countries. Because if we create a certain condition where children can participate, I think we've created it, but it's not efficient. We have to probably have one children from every single country in Africa to come and share their experiences. They said it's actually a problem of resources, but if you create that condition where the children, all one by each country of Africa, can participate, it can be a very good thing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mark. Thank you. That was excellent. To Augustine, I saw your hand. Probably can you also reflect, looking back at your key achievements of the forum? what what were some of the key achievements that you had for the forum engaging with the various other organizations on child rights and climate-related issues before the committee? So would you mind sharing that as well, Augustine?
Ok, merci beaucoup pour cette question. Ça me permet,
Much
ça me
for that
permettra
question.
d'ajouter
That
quelques
will help us
complémentaires.
to add some
Peut-être,
information that I did not
dit dans
put.
ma
I have to
présentation,
say, as I said in
s'attendait
my
à que
presentation,
cette thématique soit prise en compte.
this thematic
Le
has to
Forum
be
des
considered.
qui
The
est
forum of
spécialiste sur
NGOs
les questions de plaidoyer.
and the
Il y
specialist
a
of,
des éléments à promouvoir, peut-être qu'on va
the people
présenter
who
ou
are
qui ne seront
combating
pas
for this.
forcément
We
acceptés ou
have
bien
to implicate them
l'acceptation
so that
par
they can be
les citoyens
accepted,
du temps.
accepted by
J'aurais dit que quand
the people who decide on
qui
issues.
sont faites par
So
différents
we have
mécanismes,
the recommendation
ça
that we've
devient
put
une
together.
obligation pour l'État de prendre en
I
compte
think it's an
ces
obligation
recommandations.
to the state to
Donc,
take in
nos attentes,
count
on a
or in
vu
account these
des rapports de l'État de
recommendations.
Côte d'Ivoire
We've seen
qui n'avaient pas pris en
the
compte
report
cette
of
problématique. C'est une
the report of the state of Ivory Coast. They did not consider our recommendation. So for us, it could have been better for this thematic to be considered, because we have to implicate the kids or the children in this question of climate change, and that was the difficulty that we had. These are the kids that we cannot just let this opportunity to pass by. So we have to do some advocacy to implicate the children. So it's actually an occasion for me to remind that the African chat, that they should consider that after this report, they have to come up with to go with the same report to the forum of NGOs that we have to do the universal examination to consider this thematic and to formulate in this report 8 recommendations related to environment and climate change. So it will be a very good opportunity to see how I can come up with a mechanism and how to, we can advocate for these kids. So you have to support these recommendations, and you have to support it's an experience that we have, and we will continue to talk about this in other mechanism. Thank you.
Thank you, Augustine. We are a little
Merci
bit
beaucoup.
over time, so we really request your indulgence as we conclude. But if there are any experiences that you'd like to share from other countries other than Ivory Coast, please feel free to do so in the chat window, as well as you can also raise your hands and I can give you the chance to speak. So anyone who'd like to share experience in terms of supporting children to engage with the monitoring process of the charter that you'd like to share with your peers, we're very happy to hear that. Okay. Coffee? Coffee, I see your hand. Angie?
Oui.
Coffee, Angie.
Ange. It's not Angie. Ange.
Angie,
Okay.
I'm sorry. My apologies.
Yes. In English, Angel. Okay.
En anglais, in English is Angel. So thank you very much. I had a preoccupation in how could we reach to create some spaces where children will be actually implicated in the place of decision or in taking of decisions. How can they be in contact with the expert in terms of the program proceed with different partners? We worked to make sure that the question of participation is efficient. So if you see today that we are we actually presenting on the leadership of children. In reality, we needed some children. I mean, we wanted the children to benefit in all this promotion of children rights. And I think we have so many organizations that work with the children in our countries. And the first thing is to say we need some programs that actually promote children because they have capacities, they can produce good things if they are incorporated in the procedure. So our role, we have to accompany the role of that will allow the children to be in those discussions that we'll have. Yes, and how we can do plaidoyer. We have so many things to do at the national level, where we have to work on how to integrate the children in our discussions, to have the children to be at the center of our discussions, and that will allow us to share experience among the organization working in the welfare of children. So, and then we can elevate that to a certain level. Those committees have to be there to animate us, but they have as well to create a mechanism which will allow, or let it be the charter or something else. It has to reflect. We have to have mechanism. We have to have pillars or the principles that talks about the participation of the children. As actors that have to put that mechanism together, we have to make sure that those pillars that constitute that mechanism be efficient in our countries. And from that, we can influence to a higher level, you know. And secondly, in the program that we develop, we have to have a spirit that if we are working to bring changes in children's life, the first actors in that procedure of change after the government, it has to be the children. You know, as actors, we have to put so many effort into the children so that they can bring their input in that procedure. In Ivory Coast, we actually putting that mechanism in place. We can share the small experience that we have with some states that would like to learn from us to put that mechanism of accompaniment for the children, to put the children at the center of everything. And because we know the children are the people who are most impacted negatively or positively. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kofi.
Merci beaucoup.
So would have loved to continue these discussions, vibrant discussions, but we are constrained with time. But there is a very encouraging discussion in the chat box. I hope you are able to see that. But there were a few questions that were asked to the committee. So if I may ask Samright briefly to address some of these questions, if she so wish, that would be excellent. And afterwards, we'll be proceeding to the closing remarks. Thank you. So Samright, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Rita.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Perhaps it would be just a reflection. I think some of them are concerns that the committee also shares. I think there were concerns about representation of African voices, African children voices in COP. This is a concern that the committee and the working group also deeply shares and has in its plan, in the core of its plan, to make sure that this improves gradually. But we need to also be aware that COP is a very difficult forum for not just for children, but for all stakeholders working on human rights in general to penetrate. So we may not be seeing results soon, but to highlight that even compared to the COP 10 years ago, COP these days actually have some African children voices. We were lucky enough to have, for example, one of the African children, Naomi, from South Sudan, who participated and gave her voice in different COPs, who also came to the session of the committee to advocate for children's rights in the context of climate change in South Sudan, among other children that we've interacted with. So there is hope, but it's going to be an increasingly difficult space to penetrate. It's a space that is dominated by major polluters. I read that around 2,000 of the delegates were actually from fossil fuel companies and associated companies in COPs. So it's a space that's very, very difficult. Child participation in the African Climate Summit as well. In the first African Climate Summit, the working group had very little engagement. The working group is planning to have a bigger engagement in the 2025 African Climate Summit, in which it is hopefully, this depends on availability of resources. The working group and the committee have very rich mandates that can really take the plight of children forward, but the resources are limited, just to underline that. So depending on availability of resources, the committee plans to organize parallel session in the next African Climate Summit, and to ensure really that the voice of children are better incorporated going forward. And with the working groups, you're again right to note that we, of course, don't have children as members of the working group. And this is something that the committee has discussed and will continue to deliberate upon. Again, this depends on resources, but also cooperation with civil society actors. The committee doesn't have a presence on the ground, doesn't have branch offices and the likes. So it really relies on civil society organization partners to directly connect it with children. And that's how it has been ensuring the voice of children are incorporated. But its child participation guideline mandates it and obliged actually to ensure the voice of children are meaningfully incorporated in all the activities, not just climate change. And we are also currently in the process of discussing with one of our partners to establish a children's advisory committee that can advise all the different working groups, not just the one on climate change, because of course we need the voice of children on all of them. So it's just to say that your concerns are something that we also share, but are also working towards and we have in our plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Samra. That was a very comprehensive reply. And thank you so much for dear participants. You've been really, really active. Please, as we proceed to the closing remarks, kindly rate this webinar 1 to 10. So 1, if you were not happy with the webinar, 10, very, very happy. So you can always rate that as we hear the closing remarks from Mr. Solomon. And would also love to learn or hear what you've learned today. At least 1 or 2 things. Would love to hear from you on that as well. So keep the questions coming. We will get back to you. If there are any questions that were not addressed, again, we'll come back to you. But thank you so much for your active participation. Thank you for so much for the questions, for the experiences shared, and let's keep the conversations going. So now I would like to invite Mr. Solomon Gazahin for the closing remarks. Thank you.
Okay.
Solomon?
Thank you very much. Let me check if you can see me. My name is Solomon Mulat Gazahin. This is really wonderful webinar. So I would like to thank all of you for your rich contribution and the discussion that we had. It's really marvelous. And regardless of the fact that we were limited by time constraint, the ideas that have come from this floor were actually tremendous. We'll be sharing, of course, the recordings of this webinar and the materials as well after the webinar. And I would like to thank all the speakers, including the young man, for their insightful presentation and the participation of their engagement, the participants' engagement. Particularly, I would like to thank the young man who made really very good presentation of the case from Côte d'Ivoire. I also want to give a special thanks to all of these colleagues who have made this webinar a reality. If I have to mention names, we have, for example, John, Daniel, Hussein, Retta, Praise, Jessica, Laure, Virgilio from Plan International, Mary, James, Johan, Professor, of course, and Sam Rawit. I can actually keep on calling the names, but of course, honorable guests as well. So it was a very good workshop, I would say. I would just like to highlight that the new two case studies from Ivory Coast will be shared. And so I would like to kindly request you to share it, read it, to get inspiration from it, which can help actually, many of the civil societies for active engagement in child rights and climate change. For your information, these case studies documents are in French, English, Portuguese, and Arabic. There are many critical points which are raised here. I don't want to really go back and take time on those, but I just would like to underline the urgency and the need for claiming the space for children's voices in all the global and Pan-African and regional engagement when it comes to climate change. Children's voices should be there. So that we need to work on the space, on the civic space for them. Thank you very much for the committee, because you have already started with the guideline, but we need to work on more. Otherwise, we will still be, subsidiary. Our children would be subsidiary, participants in the influencers in this process. I like, the way, the young man presented children's leadership in the reporting process. I think that is what the leadership of children, which we need to highlight. So let's claim the voice of children in this regard. Let's work hard on this. There are critical issues which were raised by Komozo and other colleagues as well. Is COPE the only way? Is it really sustainable way, which will actually need strategic engagement? So I would like to say thank you. This is the last How to Child Rights Series webinar for 2024, but it's not the only one. Others will also come. We will continue with that one. If you want to learn more about how to child rights tools, you can check the webpage of the How to Child Rights Series. Finally, I would like to conclude this webinar by saying goodbye and see you in another webinar in 2025. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well done, Retta, and the organizers as well. I have to say it again. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Solomon. Thank you so much for that brilliant remarks. And thank you all colleagues. Thank you all participants who've joined us today. As you leave the webinar, please make sure you rate the webinar for the organizers. You can also switch on your video and say bye so that people also can take pictures if you wish. So thank you. Thank you so much again.
Thank
and
you,
goodbye.
Retta. Thank you all.
Yeah.
Merci.
Puis on vient ensemble et dit non, et j'ai dit, mais toi, comment moi j'ai accepté? On sait que t'es ça.
Thank you, Retta. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Lord.
Bye.
Special thanks to you as well. I should have said it.
Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Take care. Well done.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you all for staying so late. It's great.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Au revoir depuis la Côte d'Ivoire.
Bye bye.